Hi everyone, welcome to the start of my Tome Infinity and Beyond reading vlog. So this month I have decided that I am going to be vlogging all of the books that I read through the month in one vlog, so I'm going to try and be concise with my wrap-ups of things because otherwise this could potentially run long, but we'll see how I go. So I'm starting on, gosh, what is the date? It's the 5th. It's the 5th because I've just got home from the hockey. And I have managed to read one book today which was not on my TBR, but I will quickly run through my TBR. If you have not seen my April TBR, I'll let you know what the books are that I have selected for this readathon, and then I'll talk to you about the book that I read, which was only novella length because I was traveling and I was very distracted and I didn't get home until like 8:45 at night. So I only had the last 15% to finish when I got home. For this readathon, I picked 6 books based on 6 prompts, so you needed to complete at least 2 prompts from each level of the prompt tier game. This is what I ended up with. So I had the Solar Flare, which was to read a book that had warm colours on the cover. For that, I'm going to be reading A View from the Stars by Cixin. That's a little short story collection, I think. Then for Wormhole, which was to read a book under 300 pages, I'm going to read Toward Eternity by Anton. Also extremely excited about that one. Then for the Research Station, which was to read a book with a brilliant or unique character, I'm going to read Age of Deception by T.A. Waite, which is the second book in the Phoenix Chronicles series, which is the book that we're reading this month for the Phoenix Chronicles read-along. For Starlight Relay, which was to read a book that is highly recommended, I'm going to be reading The Cruel Stars by John Birmingham. For the Solar Eclipse, which is to read a book with a morally grey or anti-hero character, I am planning on reading Ancestral Night, although technically the book that I read today could possibly count for that as well. And then for Black Hole, which was to read a book with a hidden truth or mystery. Also tonight's book would have counted for that, but I am going to be reading Floating Hotel by Grace Curtis. So that's what I'm planning on reading. The book that I read tonight is a 100-page length novella called Murder by Memory by Olivia Waite, who is an author I have read before. I've previously read Olivia Waite's historical romances, which are all sapphic queer historical romances. So Murder by Memory is a sci-fi cozy mystery story set on a luxury space cruiser. On this ship, people live their lives, and when they die or have had enough and just need a break, their memories are stored in books in a vast library aboard the ship, and then when they're ready to be put back into bodies, a new body is made for them and they get to continue their life. So there is this real thread of immortality through it. So we open up the book with Dorothy, who is our protagonist. She is a ship's investigator and she wakes up in a body that is not hers. And then she finds out that the ship, the HMS Fairweather, which has its own artificial intelligence, kind of sentient likeness to it, informs her that strange things are happening. They've been going through some flares and the ship thinks there's been a murder. Dorothy sets off to investigate this murder, and what she discovers is a bit of a plot. And I don't really want to say more than that because the story is only 100 pages long, so any more than that, and quite literally, I give away exactly what happens. But it was really interesting, and it was very cozy in that it all is very self-contained. It takes place only over like 24 or 48 hours, and we get introduced to the character of Dorothy, and there's some really interesting discussion in the very last few pages around the role of investigators as how it links to Earth's history with police and people in charge, and how people will inherently challenge that. So it does set itself up for a sequel, and I believe that there is a sequel going to be coming if the notes at the back of the book are accurate. There should be one called Nobody's Baby. I'm really looking forward to it. Pretty much every character you meet in this book is queer, and that is absolutely delightful. It is a cozy mystery. It is sci-fi. There is murder. There are people doing shady things and unintended consequences, I will say. But I had a great time reading it. That is Murder by Memory. It was great. And I'll be back when I read one of the books I actually said I was going to read for the readathon. Hi everyone, it's been a while since I filmed an update for this particular vlog because I've been doing the Love of the Night readathon, and so now I'm finally back into the swing of the Tome Infinity readathon, and I decided to kickstart it back with Toward Eternity by Anton, which was for the prompt under 300 pages long. I absolutely loved this. It is so interesting, and I don't think I'm going to do it justice talking about it. But for those people who are curious, this is a futuristic world, and a cure for, I think, particular types of cancer has been discovered, and that is to replace all of the patient's cells with android cells, which has the side effect of essentially making that individual immortal because their cells are constantly regenerating themselves. They actually revert to a younger version of themselves. This does pose quite a few issues. And the thing you need to know about this story is that it is told through journals chronicling what happens through the eyes of different characters. So we start off with Marley, who is one of the researchers. Her mother is the person who discovered the cure. Then we have patient one's experiences. He disappears at one point, like he literally disappears into thin air and then returns. But is he the same? Is he not? How does that work? He was working on an artificial intelligence that is able to respond critically to poetry. And then that AI is put into a synthetic human body and lives a life. And then that AI's essentially essence is utilized in a particular way, and then we follow the characters that are descended from that research and that experiment to the point where humanity is essentially wiped out by these artificially intelligent individuals in android immortal bodies, and how that affects Earth and humanity, and how that programming eventually begins to replicate humanity. Like, it's deeply, deeply fascinating, and I'm 100% not doing it justice in explaining it. Like, you just kind of have to read it. But the fascinating thing is that all these characters are telling this story by passing on this original notebook that belonged to Marley, and they're adding to it. And this becomes an important historical piece of record that characters pick up no matter where they are or who they are in this timeline. Some of them are researchers, some of them are individuals, some of them are soldiers that are created for this war between humans and artificial intelligence. It was just a wild ride. Like, it was a wild ride. I'm sure I have missed plenty of themes. I'd need to go back and reread it, but it's so beautifully written and just such an interesting look at artificial intelligence and how something might be created for one purpose, then how it's manipulated into something else. But even that intersection between artificial intelligence and poetry, there's also a character who's a musician, and how poetry and music still hold an influence on what's happening and how these characters react to certain things, and the importance of language and vocabulary. Really cool, interesting stuff. There is stuff that involves a space station orbiting Earth. It's so cool. If you are at all interested in that kind of speculative science fiction, futuristic kind of stuff, highly worth reading this if you like beautiful language. And I had a great time just diving into it. Another book that I'm currently reading, which was not on my TBR, but I just managed to get the audiobook out, is The Deep Sky, which is a sci-fi book I've been meaning to read for ages. It is set in space. We're following Asuka, who is the Japanese representative, or one of the Japanese representatives on board this ship. And this ship is filled with women or individuals who are able to reproduce, and they all have some kind of science background. They're in space trying to reach a specific destination, but along the way they're also supposed to be pregnant and to start the next generation, etc. And at the very start of the book, Asuka is on a spacewalk to fix something, and then there is an explosion and they discover that there is a bomb that has gone off. And so a big part of the first section of the book, I'm about 40% of the way through it so far, is investigating the bomb, who is responsible for it. They are knocked off course and they are struggling to get to their final destination, so that's causing a lot of concern. The original captain was killed in that first blast, and so there is someone else who has taken on that role. We're also jumping backwards in time as these women were being trained at 12 years old for this mission. So yeah, I'm waiting for a few more pieces to fall into place, but it is a very interesting book and it's quite a good audio. I will update you more when I have finished that. Hi everyone, I'm coming to you with an update for the Readathon, and I have 2 books I've read, 2 I've DNF'd, and 1 book that I'm still reading. So I'm still reading The Deep Sky. I'm listening to it. It's just taking a while because I haven't had a lot of listening time recently. It's just the way that it's worked out. I have again deviated from my TBR, and I wanted to reread All Systems Red by Martha Wells because Murderbot is coming out next month on Prime. So I grabbed the first book. I was talking to a friend about it, which is kind of what got me into the headspace. So I actually immersion read this, so I had the graphic audio plus the book. Most of the time I was immersive reading it, some of the time I wasn't, I was just listening to it. The graphic audio is great. If you have not read this series, highly recommend it. This is a great entry point for sci-fi because it's action-packed, it is sci-fi, it's set on another planet, but it's very, very accessible and it's short. And the narrator is very relatable. If you're unfamiliar at all with the Murderbot Diaries series, we follow a sec unit, which is basically an augmented human, but they consider themselves more bot than human, and their job is to work as security units for a company who then rents them out to people who need them. And in this case, Murderbot is a sec unit who has hacked its own governor module after a mission that went wrong, and now just plays along with everything and is on a job with a group of researchers on a planet. And Murderbot is quite content to just kind of watch holodramas every day and consume media and then, you know, do its job when it needs to without anyone being any the wiser. However, when the researchers begin to realize that something is amiss on the planet that they're on, they also discover that the sec unit is rogue. And there are some hilarious attempts because this group of researchers are really, really nice people. Like, they're lovely people and they want to make Murderbot feel comfortable, except Murderbot doesn't want to be comfortable around people. Murderbot wants people to leave them alone. So that makes for some very, very funny moments. I love this. I kind of just want to go and marathon the rest of the series, but I do have other things that I would like to read. So I'm restraining myself slightly, but if I devolve by the end of the month, you know what happened. I then started and DNF'd both The Cruel Stars by John Birmingham and Ancestral Night by Elizabeth Bear, which were science fiction books that I've had on my Kindle since like 2019. I tried them. I found them really difficult to get into, and I think this comes back to, and I've talked about this many other times before, I like information about the world that we're building, but I'm kind of specific in how I like that to be fed to me. And when it's all in the first chapter, or when there's not enough in the first chapter to hook me into the world, then I switch off. And for books that are both over 400 or 500 pages long, like it was not grabbing me at all. So as I've said, you know, it's an author's job to hook people from the very first page. You cannot rely on the fact that someone is going to sift through pages and pages and pages to be interested in your book. So I definitely don't feel any guilt over DNFing them. You know, that's the job of an author, is to hook you in. And if it doesn't gel, it doesn't gel. Then I read A View from the Stars by Cixin Liu, which is a collection of his stories and essays. So some of this is science fiction, some of this is discussions of science fiction, and Cixin Liu is a Chinese science fiction writer. All of his work has been translated. If you're unfamiliar with his work, he wrote The Three-Body Problem and that series. And I have read The Three-Body Problem many years ago, and I'm kind of terrified to go back to it. That said, I really enjoyed reading his short fiction, and especially his essays, which they've been organized in a way so that the stories and the essays kind of complement one another. He's very thoughtful in his essays as he talks about sort of the rise and the moments of science fiction in China, you know, his part in it and the way that science fiction is rooted in science, and that's what differentiates it from fantasy, in that it's not supposed to necessarily be a complete fantasy. There should be elements that we can see of science within the texts, and I quite like that idea. I think that's a really great way to delineate between sci-fi and fantasy. He also had a really lovely essay where he was just praising the work of Ken Liu, who is someone who has translated some of his books from memory, but also writes their own science fiction. And I've read some of their work as well, and they are wonderful, wonderful pieces of writing. And it was just nice to read another author uplifting and praising and just being a fan of someone else. Like, that was really lovely. And there are a couple of stories in here that I did like. I've just got to remember which ones they were. Oh, there was The Messenger, which is the story of someone, an academic, who is playing a musical instrument and is visited by a stranger. And the stranger keeps coming back until eventually he gifts the academic with a violin, and the violin strings at first are really, really fragile, but the more that the violin is played, the stronger they get. This stranger is a traveller, and I won't say more than that, but it was just a really nice little story and was probably my favourite of the stories in the collection. So yeah, all in all, a really great little collection. I got so many quotes out of this. I don't know if you can see it, but the orange tabs are all the different stories and essays, but the purple tabs are all the quotes, and I'm just waiting for a particular notebook to arrive because I am starting a commonplace quote book. I've technically already started one, but I'm having a couple of different ones for different types of quotes. I've got one for children's lit, and I'm going to be doing one for my adult reading. So yes, I thought this was a really interesting collection. And so what's next? I'm really tempted today to dive into Age of Deception, but I probably won't. I'm probably going to save that for next week, because next week I've got a few things on and I might need something as a pick-me-up. So I'm probably going to pick up Floating Hotel by Grace Curtis. Aside from Age of Deception, this was the last of the physical books that I put on my TBR. I do have a few others that I might pick up later after I've finished those. And I also have When the Moon Hits Your Eye by John Scalzi. So I'm out tomorrow. I might take this with me while I'm out for Easter Sunday and read this one today, and hopefully also just finally finish the deep sky. It's not that I'm not enjoying the story, it's just that it's taking a while because I just haven't had enough time. I just haven't had time to sit and listen to stuff. So, well, I haven't made time for it. I'll get there. I'll get there. So I will update you when I have read something else. Alrighty friends, so I have a couple more updates. I did finally finish The Deep Sky, and maybe I probably would have enjoyed it more if I had read it with my eyeballs instead of listening to it as an audiobook as it was. I think I talked earlier, I just haven't had a lot of time to listen to it, and I kept putting off listening to it as well. It is about a world where a group of women have been trained from a very young age to be ambassadors to go into space, and their goal is to take basically a generation ship to have children and to eventually land on a future planet because humans have been terrible, we've destroyed the Earth. It's a very common theme in science fiction. We're in the perspective of Asuka, I think, and she is someone who, you know, wasn't especially bright or brilliant during training, and you know, as they had hundreds of candidates, they were whittling them down to the core number of participants, representatives from their home countries. She was eventually selected as an alternate, which means she's there as the jack of all trades. She literally is there to fill in spots where they need her to. At the very start of the book, there is an explosion that kills the captain and a couple of other members of the crew. The augmented reality that they all live with, that helps them, you know, deal with being in space for a long time. Asuka notices that hers is glitchy. She's there trying to help solve what is going on. She finds herself having the finger pointed at her at various points. And a lot of these women who, you know, started training when they were pre-teens, who then boarded this ship and then spent 10 years asleep in the first part of the journey and were then woken up and have been going through basically IVF treatments. Some of them are pregnant, some of them are close to giving birth, others are struggling to fall pregnant, which again is kind of a stigma because the whole point was to, you know, raise a new generation of people. All this is going on, and Asuka knows that something is not right, and she begins to suspect that the ship's artificial intelligence, Alpha, has something to do with it. And at its core, this is a story that really challenges our understanding of our world, particularly when you are living within an augmented reality where and suddenly you can't trust that what you're seeing is real. There are some moments towards the end of the book as we're getting closer to finding out who actually set the bomb and who's responsible for all of that, and is it connected to Earth and sort of an eco-terrorist group back on Earth, that the augmented reality starts to go haywire for more people than just Asuka. Like, it's interesting. I think there's some interesting commentary in there around billionaires who funded this trip, around the rights of women, around pregnancy, but also difficulty falling pregnant. I don't think it goes into any of those issues in any great depth, which makes this feel like it's lacking in something. Asuka spends the entire book feeling like she's lesser because she's the alternate, like she wasn't supposed to be there. And other people basically say that outright to her face at different points in the story. And so, like, as a main character, that can either make you feel sympathetic towards her, or it can really separate the reader from the point of view character. Kind of felt closer to the end of starting to feel a lack of sympathy for her. I wasn't completely there, but it was close. So yeah, like cool concept. It's essentially a locked room mystery set on a spaceship traveling through space, particularly since this bombing throws the ship off course and they don't have enough power or supplies to turn around and go home. And if they don't get back on course, they don't have enough to get to the planet that they were supposed to reach. So there's that added tension. But yeah, I would have liked it maybe if it had picked a few of the ideas that it had and really dove into them a little bit more. I don't know if any of that makes sense. I just finished Floating Hotel by Grace Curtis, which is a cozy sci-fi mystery. It's very slice of life, and the book is told in a couple of parts. I think it might be 3 parts? 3 parts. Each of the parts are the title of an old science fiction film that is being shown aboard this floating hotel, this luxury hotel, and each chapter within those parts is from a different character's perspective. So we start off in Carl's perspective. Carl is the manager of the ship, and he first came aboard the ship by stowing away on it. And then when the then manager of the ship found out about him, she eventually offered him a job, and so he worked many jobs and over the course of 40 years became this ship's manager. And we're introduced to a lot of players, and then we get their perspective, and each character's chapter moves the story forward. Essentially, this floating hotel has been around for 40 plus years. It travels the same route, and we know it exists in a world, in a galaxy where there is an emperor who is in charge, and this emperor may or may not have clones that they replace themselves with constantly, so this emperor is reigning in perpetuity. And then there is also Lamplighter, who is someone who is questioning the emperor and raising concerns and highlighting things that no one should know. Suddenly people begin to suspect that Lamplighter exists on this floating hotel. And so suddenly you have assassins and you have spies and you have other people trying to figure out who Lamplighter is. Meanwhile, the crew of the ship are just going about their daily business and get caught up in all of this. It's very much found family with this crew, who is a complete hodgepodge of characters, some of whom have committed crimes in their past, so making them suspects, but all have found a home aboard this ship. And we meet everyone from the manager to the concierge to the accountant to the chef and the sous chef and all of these characters, and then trying to figure out who is Lamplighter, what's going to happen when Lamplighter's identity is discovered. And it's not a book that has a huge driving force through it. Like, this is the story, but it's each of these characters in that moment. We learn a little bit about their history, but also they're the next section of information that we get. So we get little clues as to who Lamplighter is. And then the reveal isn't until the last couple of pages. And it's really interesting. Like, this will not be for everyone. The storytelling style is really unique, but I had a great time. It was a great cozy sci-fi, and it was enjoyable. I thoroughly enjoyed my time reading it. Hi everyone. Welcome to another late night sci-fi reading vlog update, because apparently I only ever update these things at night. I have read 2 more books since I last spoke to you, and let's just talk about them. I'm also currently in the middle of another audiobook. That might be the last book that ends up being on this vlog. The audiobook is, oh gosh, it's a Jessie Mihalik sci-fi romance, Hunt the Stars, by Jessie Mihalik. So that's what I'm currently listening to, although I need to get back on that because it's been a couple of days. I finally did my reread of Age of Deception by T.A. Waite, because the live show is coming this weekend. It is currently, well, it's Thursday here. I read this yesterday, and the live show is on Sunday for me, but this vlog will be going up after it, so I will be able to leave the live show linked on the screen. Age of Deception is the second book in the Phoenix Chronicles series. It is a sci-fi romance series. It follows Kira, who is a woman who had a very traumatic upbringing, where she was experimented and tortured as a child. She was taken from her family home. She was rescued and she was raised among humans, and she was also trained to be a warrior. And so she has been in the space version of Earth's military for a very long time. In the first book, she discovers that her ancestry might be a little bit more complicated than she first thought. And in this second book, she finds herself back on her home planet. And I kind of can't tell you how that all comes together. But this series, if you've heard me talk about it before, it is very much like Ilona Andrews, but sci-fi romance. If you like Ilona Andrews' writing style and you like the way that they write their characters with banter and dialogue and action sequences, this is a really good series to pick up. It's a very good read alike, while being different enough that you can tell that it's not an author taking another 2 authors' work, if that makes sense. I absolutely adored rereading this. Kira's relationship with Graydon, who is the military commander of the Tuan, is just top notch. All of their scenes in this are hilarious because they're both very intelligent characters, and they're both always looking for that one thing that's going to put them the step ahead of the other person, while also playing into their mutual attraction to one another. Like, it's very fun. And there's a lot of really great world building that goes on in this book. We get a lot of new characters. Finn is one of my favorite characters ever. I'm loving my reread. I can't wait to talk about this for the read along. It was great to pick it up, and I purposely have to hold off reading those books to the week before the live show, because otherwise I just want to go straight into the next book. And if I do that, I'm going to forget what it is that I'm talking about in a live show. Then the book that I read tonight was Agent to the Stars by John Scalzi, which was not the John Scalzi book I was planning on picking up. I was going to pick up When the Moon Hit Your Eye, but in the end, my desire to start tackling my pre-2025 TBR won out, and so this was my physical John Scalzi book that was sitting on my TBR. And I believe when I was reading the notes, so this was first published 2005, maybe earlier. I have a feeling that this is John Scalzi's first published sci-fi book. because there's a note at the beginning that talks about how he ended up writing sci-fi. Turns out it was the flip of a coin. If you get a chance, just read the author's introduction at the start. Like, it was just fascinating. Anyway, this one follows Thomas Stein, who is a agent to film stars. So this is set on Earth, and he is given the job of a lifetime when he's asked to represent an alien race and help bring about their first contact with humanity. And the alien that he's paired with getting to know and work with is called Joshua. And these aliens are blob-like aliens, and they communicate through smells, and not very nice ones at that. And the longer that Tom and Joshua spend together, the more they get to know and understand each other. But Tom is also doing his job as an agent to the stars, quite literally. And when his headline star ends up in a coma, there are some very interesting moral, ethical dilemmas that pose themselves, and it's a very interesting read. It's a very interesting read. I'm not going to say more than that, other than it was really interesting to come back to something like this from John Scalzi. It was fascinating, and I mean, he's very good at blending humor and science fiction together and basing things on things that we already know. So it was really interesting, but I was not expecting the moral and ethical quandary that pops up in the sort of the last third of the book. But on that note, I will update you when I finish Hunt the Stars or anything else. Hi everyone, it is time to wrap up the Tome Infinity vlog. It has been a while since I filmed for this, to be honest, because I finished my last book and then I was unwell and a few things happened, so I just didn't get back to wrapping up the last little part of my science fiction reading for the month of April, which was really exciting. I got through so many books. The last thing I ended up finishing was a reread, and this time an audio listen, of Last Chance to Save the World by Beth Revis. I had the audio arc from NetGalley, and I have read and reviewed the book before, but to go back and actually listen to the audio, because I have listened to the audios for all the other books in the trilogy, and it is such a fun ride. If you are not familiar at all with the Chaotic Orbits series, we are following a scavenger who is always one step ahead of her opponents, who ends up having to work with a government official who is trying to put her in jail, but is also in love with her. And in the third book, they are working together to stop the Earth from being irrevocably damaged by the work of billionaires. It is so delightful and fun. It has amazing banter, and the tension between the love interests in the story is great. It does not end on an HEA or even an HFN, but it does end on a I'm going to chase you until I catch you kind of vibe, and I love that. I think I also mentioned that I was listening to a Jessie Mihalik audiobook. I ended up DNFing that one. I can't even remember what it's called. I will have to check my notes when I am editing this vlog. Yeah, in the end, it just wasn't working for me, and after talking to Heather, who had read it, she said it wasn't as good as the other series that I've been reading from her. So I will come back to her books at a later date. Okay, and now I have to look at my notes to try and remember what it is that I actually read during the whole month, because a month is a really long time for a readathon for me. So there was Murder by Memory by Olivia Waite, Toward Eternity by Anton, which I absolutely loved, The Deep Sky, which was another audio. I DNF'd The Cruel Stars by John Birmingham and Ancestral Night by Elizabeth Bear. I ended up reading Agent to the Stars by John Scalzi, not the most recent release. What else? Oh my gosh. Oh, I read A View from the Stars by Cixin, Floating Hotel by Grace Curtis, Age of Deception by T.A. White, and Last Chance to Save the World. I think that was a pretty successful reading month. So thank you again to Meg for asking me to be a co-host for the readathon this past month. It was such a delight to come back to this readathon and just to get into some sci-fi books. Like, I know I should be able to do it all the time, but this was just the perfect motivation to get through a chunk of them, and I loved it so much. I will leave a list of all the books I read down below, as well as links to all of the hosts for the readathon, so you can go check out their wrap-ups if you are so inclined. If you participated and you read something science fiction related in the month, feel free to let me know down below. Otherwise, feel free to leave any kind of space-related emoji. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.